Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen are destined to go mad because they're both descended from the Mad King, right? Wrong! Targaryen Madness is a propaganda tactic used by the new dynasty, the Baratheons, to make the old one look cuckoo. And you know what? It doesn't hurt when the last Targaryen was actually a little crazy, but you know what? There's an explanation for that because there's an explanation for everything. Well, yeah, but the incest, so they're all supposed to go crazy. This is a universe with dragons, you nincompoops. They look like Swedish supermodels. The incest isn't incesting in a logical or common world way. So let's talk about the Mad King himself, Aerys II Targaryen, how he became mad, what led to his madness, and yes, we're only going to talk about him today. Any other person that you want to be like, oh, well, he was mad too, drop it in the comments. I'll tell you why it's bullshit in another video, okay? Now, having said that, I would like to say that 9 times out of 10, when a Targaryen king is labeled as mad or cruel or evil or whatever, typically they aren't actually crazy. Typically, 9 times out of 10, they're just an asshole. The issue being, of course, is when you have that much, privilege and power at your fingertips, your assholery has far-reaching implications for the people under you. But 9 times out of 10, that's all it is. They're just dicks. And for most of his reign, that was basically the case for Aerys over here. So Aerys came to the throne, I believe, in 266, in the Westerosi years. He was 18. He was very young. His father had been sickly most of his life, just physically ill. And so his father had been crowned and then 3 years later died. And so Aerys very quickly became the king, at a young age. And for the majority of his reign, because he reigned for almost 30 years, it was 29 or something, he was basically fine. Not great, but not terrible. For the first 20-ish or so years, he was just, the average arrogant, asshole with a lot of privilege who kind of just liked to swing it around a little bit. Because at the end of the day, this is kind of the core issue, is, when there is someone with this much power and privilege, especially from a young age, they are used to, getting their way and feeling that sense of importance. And so, when you don't have any guardrails, you can become an asshole very easily, as this man did. We see that presented mostly in his relationship with Tywin, because remember, Tywin and Aerys were best friends from childhood. So when Aerys became the king and Tywin became the hand, it was like a match made in heaven. The besties were ruling the kingdom together and they were doing a really good job. But as time went on and, both of these men kind of got stuck in their ways, there became a lot of friction. And because Tywin was smarter than this guy, Aerys, was a little resentful of that. Not to mention Tywin married Joanna, which Aerys apparently had a thing for. Now, I will say at this point that we do get some indications that, while he was mostly just an asshole, there might have been some, mental health issues under the surface, though mostly staying under wraps towards the end of the initial, 20-year period. According to Barriston Selmy, and again, this is a man thinking in hindsight, and you have to remember how, POVs work, they're not always a reliable narrator, but in his mind, he felt that he had seen, little instances or hints of Aerys's madness. Again, madness. Remember, it's a broad term, so just everyone fucking chill. But Barriston felt like he had seen small instances of Aerys's true nature or whatever coming through momentarily here and there before he went into full cuckoo mode in the aftermath of the Defiance of Duskendale, which I will get to. The Defiance of Duskendale is what really sent Aerys into Mad King realm, but before that, that's what we're talking about right now. Now, based on how Barriston is describing Aerys, if we want to use a real world whatever, I would say it sounds like it's some kind of mood disorder, because the way he describes it is basically crazy mood swings. He'd be very happy one second, he'd be despondent the next, and then he'd be back to normal. And so it was lots of back and forth. It sounds a little untreated bipolar, maybe. Again, we don't have obviously any tests for fictional characters. But that is important, I think, to, include in the calculus of, someone going crazy, is maybe there is an underlying something, and then it gets, progressively worse as it's left untreated, and then if it gets sent into overdrive by a very traumatic event, that's how we can see, actual, losing your mind madness, suddenly coming out. And again, madness is a broad term, just like losing control of your faculties and the issues that would ensue. But before I get to Dusk and Dale, the reason that I am really hammering home this timeline thing is I know that people are going to want to argue that with especially Daenerys, but maybe Jon, whatever, any Targaryen, they're going to be like, oh, well, that's it. They all have like a thing, and then as long as there's like a traumatic event, boom, they're cuckoo now, yay. And to that, I would say like, no, because remember the timeline with Aerys, and he is like, yes, the indisputable one who like fully lost control of his faculties, and it caused lots of issues because of his, inherent position and privilege, but this took place over the course of almost 30 years. So we had 25-ish years of like mostly normal, just kind of occasionally dickish, traumatic event that lasted 6 months, and then after traumatic event, we had another, I think, 5 or 6 years of the full descent, okay? So that timeline isn't the same as, some bells ringing and then, ooh, I gotta burn everything. And please remember, in the books, bells ringing leading to someone losing their mind applies to a completely different character whose name isn't Daenerys Targaryen, and it's a dude. Okay, so let's talk about the Defiance of Dusk and Dale, the event that really sent Aerys over the edge. So by this point, Aerys and Tywin's relationship had really deteriorated. People had been saying that basically Tywin was the real one running the country, which in a way he kind of was because he's Tywin, and Aerys didn't like that. So he started kind of rebelling against Tywin a little bit, being like, I don't want to listen to you all the time because you're pissing me off. And that, of course, led to some issues. The issue turning into the Defiance of Dusk and Dale. So Dusk and Dale is a castle, region, little area, whatever, that is ruled by House Darklyn. Specifically at the time, it's by this lord right here. His name is Lord Dennis Darklyn. The thing to know about the Darklyns is they used to be kings like many of these big houses, and they've never quite gotten over the fact that they, stopped being kings. And so Dennis over here gets really pissy at, losing a lot of his trade money, because Dusk and Dale used to be the big trade port in the area. It's very close to King's Landing and the Red Keep, but because of King's Landing becoming a bigger and bigger city, sucking up more and more of that money, Dusk and Dale has, kind of shriveled a little bit. So Dennis, because he thinks he's, the coolest dude around, he's like, hey, I want to be treated like Dorne, because Dorne just gets to kind of do whatever the fuck they want, so I want a new charter that gives me more rights than everyone else. And yeah, dude, get in line. Now, when he asks the crown for this, Tywin promptly says, no, that's stupid, we're not doing that, go away. But Dennis isn't done, because he knows that Tywin and Aerys aren't getting along, so what he does is he extends an invitation to the crown, inviting them to come to Dusk and Dale so that he can present and pitch his case in person to Aerys. Tywin is like, dude, no, and so he tells Aerys, I don't think you should do that, that's dumb. But Aerys, at the time, being like, I'm independent, Tywin doesn't rule me, I rule him. He's like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna go, and that's gonna be fine. It wasn't fine. So Aerys ends up going with his, with a very small group of guards. He gets there and is promptly, basically taken captive by Darklyn over here. His knights are all slaughtered, and he is thrown in a dungeon where he will remain in the dark and being tortured for the next 6 months. Now, obviously, at this point, it's Tywin's job to come get him out, but Tywin, being Tywin, lays siege to Dusk and Dale for 6 months and doesn't do anything to, actually physically try to remove him, under the pretense that Lord Darklyn said that if anyone tried to, reach the king, that they would kill him. Now, it's heavily speculated that Tywin kind of wanted this to happen eventually, or hoped that he would, die in the interim, because, Rhaegar is a little more sensible, and also at the time was younger, so I think the hope was that if Rhaegar's in charge, he would, still have a hand, and he doesn't have to deal with Aerys anymore, and the relationship has, soured. But finally, after 6 months, he's like, fine, I'm just going to invade, and we're going to grab him, and it's going to be fine. Probably knowing that, okay, the second that they try to do that, he's probably going to be killed, and either way, it's a win-win situation. But this is where Barriston comes in and says, hey, let me try a, one-man solo mission to save him so that we don't, trip the guards, and then everyone, runs in and kills him immediately. Tywin's like, fine, you can do that. I assume, thinking he's going to, die anyway. But Barriston does it. He, gets him out, and then just as he does, they, take the city and they execute everyone who is in there. House Darklyn is fully killed in some gruesome ways that I cannot repeat on here. And it's at this point that Aerys comes out actually like out of his mind. And so because of that, he spends the next years holed up in the Red Keep in King's Landing, refusing to leave the castle and slowly descending into madness. Again, over 4 years. Then the last 2 years is the tourney of Harrenhal, the Robert's Rebellion, and that whole thing, you know, lots of crazy. But again, there was a reason behind it, okay, y'all? Okay, goodbye.